what exactly are humates?
Humic substances are carbonaceous materials that result from the primarily microbial breakdown of dead plant tissues. They occur in soils, in compost, in peats, in sapropels, in water, and also in different types of coals. In soils and in compost, the process of microbial breakdown is called humification, and this is carried out by bacteria and fungi. In peats develop because the soil is waterlogged and organic material accumulates, and it's mostly a bacterial degradation process. And then coals are formed when peats are covered either by volcanic activity or subsidence from mountain ranges or inundation by ocean sediments. And over millions of years, the peat is formed into coals. There's a couple different types of soft coals that we can obtain humic substances from, and these include brown coals, lignitic or oxidized lignitic coals, which are also called leonardites, which everybody refers to their humic substances as, but also oxidized subbituminous coals, like that we use from our mine in northwest New Mexico. Yeah, so all humic substances are not the same because peats develop with different vegetation types in different climates. The coals that are produced from the peats are different, and thus the humic substances that are obtained from the coals are different. These different humic substances have different effects on plants. So one humic substance obtained from one source is different from another humic substance.
How do these humics work in our fields?
So humic substances work as plant biostimulants, and they cause a metabolic reprogramming in the plant due to the stress that they exert on the plant. Metabolic reprogramming results in higher efficiency in different metabolic activities such as photosynthesis and the production of sugar and energy in the form of ATP, so that it can be used to, for example, have greater productivity in the plant. And one of the other features that humic substances effect on plants is to produce a more highly ramified root system. In other words, there's a lot more fine roots produced, and this is where the uptake of nutrients and water happens. So not only is the photosynthesis more efficient, but the uptake system is more efficient, fueled by the greater ATP produced by the photosynthesis.
How do humates improve my soil health?
Okay, in terms of the crop plants, the humic substances cause eustress or beneficial stress in plants. Plants always experience some kind of stress throughout the growing season. And humic substances result in an upregulation of, for example, photosynthetic activity and enhanced fine root system development for uptake of water and nutrients, so that the plants are better able to withstand stress when it occurs. And of course, many times this also results in enhanced productivity by the crop plants. In terms of the soil, the effect on the plants also results in improved excretion of root exudates, which enhances soil microbial activity and actually selects for beneficial microbes. The more microbes that are produced, they all have water in them, so you get an increased water content in the soil. You can tell this when you walk on a nice healthy soil because it's spongy. And then the microbes also produce exudates, carbohydrates that bind soil particles together and enhance the soil structure. So this is how humic materials enhance soil health, is an indirect effect of the biostimulant effect on plants. In addition, there's a lot of talk about adding carbon to the soil, and the enhanced root exudates as a result of the biostimulant effect that humic substances have on plants add carbon to the soil and also enhance the microbial activity. And then when these microbes die, they add carbon to the soil, and then they enhance fine root structure when the fine roots die, they also add carbon to the soil. So again, it's kind of an indirect effect. And one of the myths I'd like to dispel is that when you add humic substances to soil, it doesn't enhance the water holding capacity. It doesn't enhance the carbon exchange or the cation exchange capacity. And it doesn't enhance soil structure. These are all indirect benefits of the biostimulant activity of humic substances. When you think about adding 2 gallons of a product to an acre of soil, and it only contains 10% humic acids, the amount of carbon that you're actually adding is minute. It's just a drop in the bucket. But the indirect effects of the biostimulant activity is what adds carbon to the soil. One of the benefits of the humic substance biostimulant effect is an enhanced nutrient use efficiency afforded to plants. Because of the enhanced energy, there's more energy for uptake of water and nutrients. With the more ramified root system that's produced by humic acid or humic substance treated plants, there's more foraging capacity. And the other thing that happens is nutrients are taken up by plants through protein, what we call transporters, that exist in the cell membranes of plants. And plants that are treated with humic substances have more of these proteins. So not only do you have more root foraging capacity, but you have more chances for uptake of nutrients by the enhanced numbers of transporters, and you have more energy for uptake and moving the nutrients around. So you can actually use less nitrogen when you treat with humic substances, which decreases the impact of nitrogen on the environment, but also lets the farmer spend less on his fertilizer.
What's the difference between liquid humates and dry humates?
Okay, liquid humic products are produced from alkaline extracts of the soft coal materials in general. Those are what is used for the development of commercial products. And they can be extracted with potassium hydroxide or ammonium hydroxide and have different concentrations of humic acid. The concentrations generally range from 4% all the way up to 18% in general for products. The nice thing about liquid products is they can be used for both soil and foliar applications, whereas dry products can only be used for soil applications. There are also intermediate products where coal that's been pulverized or micronized can be mixed with solid KOH, and then when this is applied to the soil, the KOH dissolves in the soil solution and then can extract the humic acid and make it very soluble and available to plants. At the far end of the spectrum, we have coal that's been pulverized or micronized to different sizes, all the way from less than 10 microns up to millimeters in diameter. And the bioavailability of these is based on the size. The smaller the particle size, the greater the surface area, the greater the availability. And in terms of bioavailability to plants, at the high end of the spectrum are the liquid products that are immediately available. Intermediate are the dry products that are mixed with potassium hydroxide. And at the low end of the spectrum are the solid products. And so what's better for your farm really depends on the application and the purpose. If you want immediate results, you would probably look at using a liquid product. If you're looking for longer term results, maybe lasting over a couple growing seasons, then you would want to use solid products.
I keep hearing about humic acid and fulvic acid, but what's the difference?
Humic substances are divided into 3 fractions actually, and these include the humic acids, the fulvic acids, and the humin fraction, which is the fraction you don't usually hear about, and that's spelled Humin. The definitions of these 3 fractions are operationally based, and it's basically based on their solubility in alkaline or acid aqueous solutions. Humic acids are soluble in alkaline solutions, and that's why we use such extractions as KOH or ammonium hydroxide, because they have high pHs. The pH of an extraction solution might be pH 13, so it's very high. So humic acids are soluble at high pH, but insoluble at low pH. And this is why you don't want to add a humic acid solution to a acidic fertilizer, because they'll precipitate and then clog your spray heads if you're using it that way. Fulvic acids are soluble at all pHs. And then the human fraction is insoluble. So when we're extracting it, the human fraction gets left behind. In terms of the difference between humic acids and fulvic acids, humic acids and fulvic acids are composed of thousands of different molecules. And they are composed of aliphatic molecules, which are long carbon chains, and also aromatic molecules that are, for example, a benzene ring. And then you can have a couple of benzene rings attached to each other. Both of these aliphatic and aromatic molecules have what we call oxygen-containing functional groups. For example, they can have an alcoholic group, or they can have a carboxylic group like acetic acid, otherwise known as vinegar. And so when these are in water, here's a water molecule here. Water is actually has charges on it. Oxygen has a negative charge, and the hydrogens have a slight positive charge. And so when you just have water by itself, these hydrogens can bind to the oxygen, and that's what gives water its surface tension. Well, these functional groups in the humic materials, as I've shown here, can the phenolic hydroxyl, I call it, the alcoholic group, the negative charge on the oxygen can bind to the hydrogen positive charge in water. And same thing with the carboxylic acid, the positive charge on the hydrogen can bind to the negative charge, the oxygen. And this makes these molecules soluble in water. The difference between humic and fulvic molecules is as we decrease the pH, for example, if we have a potassium hydroxide solution, as you decrease the pH, the hydrogen will knock the potassium off of the alcohol. And it becomes what we call protonated with this proton or this hydrogen ion. And so fulvic molecules have a lot of these functional groups. They're able to bond, hydrogen bond with water and stay in solution. Whereas humic molecules that are included in the humic fraction don't have enough of these oxygen-containing functional groups to bind with the oxygen or hydrogen in water to stay in solution. Thus, when we drop the pH, we make it more acidic. The humic molecules will drop out of solution and start to coalesce or precipitate. And that's basically the difference between humic and fulvic acids. Another difference that is brought up, and used to be brought up more than it is now, is that humic molecules are larger than fulvic molecules. And this is only true to a certain extent. If you do a mass spec analysis, which gives you the formula for all the molecules that are present in humic and fulvic acids, we grade them or we weigh them in terms of what are called Daltons. For example, carbon weighs 12 Daltons. And you can add all these up, like oxygen is 16, hydrogen is 1. And the molecules for both humic and fulvic acids in general range between 200 and 800 Daltons. The median for humic acid might be a little shifted to the right. The big difference is these oxygen-containing functional groups, so that fulvic acid molecules have a lot more oxygen in them, whereas humic molecules have a higher carbon content. But that's because of the difference in the amount of oxygen-containing functional groups.
So how does my soil pH affect how my humates work?
Well, it depends on the application. So this is a question that requires a couple different levels of explanation. If you have a foliar application, of course, no, soil pH has no effect. But if you're having a soil application, there can be an effect when you have a calcareous soil. You have a lot of calcium and magnesium in the soil. The divalent cations can cross-link humic molecules through the functional groups of the phenolic hydroxyls and carboxylic acids. However, plants maintain a pH of about 5.5 in the what we call the apoplast, which is the open areas in the cell walls, and also in the rhizosphere, which is the soil area right outside of the root surface. And so, if the molecules make it that far, then the pH isn't going to have an effect.
Does my soil type matter when it comes to applying humates?
Yeah, soil type can have an effect. There was a very interesting study done by one of our colleagues who works for the USDA ARS, Dan Olk, and he did a study on a couple farms that had different topography, and there were different soil types within the topography that range from well-drained soils to not well-drained soil, and they were across a couple different soil types or even within the soil type. And over a couple of years, where they were looking at the growth of and productivity of corn, they did find soil type effect. In bad years and years where there wasn't a lot of rainfall, they would get a increase in productivity across the soil types. But in good years, when there was productivity, only in the soils that were not well drained did they get actually an increase in productivity due to humic substance treatment. So we need to know a lot more about the effect of the environmental conditions that affected the performance of humic substances. But in general, you can think of using humic substances as an insurance policy, because you're always going to have stress during the growing season. And so it can be thought of as boosting the performance of the plants in general, and so that when there is a stress, they're better able to handle it than the non-treated humic substance treated plants. A good example of that is, again, some work by Dan Olk, and he has a great picture that shows corn that was treated with humic substances right next to corn that wasn't, and there was a big windstorm, and all the corn that was not treated with humic substances were blown down. So the humic substances actually increased the thickness of the corn stalks so that they were able to withstand this windstorm. So another example of the enhanced capacity of humic substance treated plants to handle stress.
Can humic acid stabilize nitrogen?
Well, of course, nitrogen is applied in forms of ammonium, nitrate, and urea. In terms of ammonia, if the ammonia is converted to the ammonium form, which is positively charged, it can be bound by negative charges in humic substances depending on the pH. There are different functional groups in humic substances, including carboxylic acids and phenolic hydroxyls. In the carboxylic acids, the OH part of the carboxylic acid can become negatively charged at low pHs, and the hydroxyl group of the phenolic hydroxyls can become negatively charged at pHs from 7 to 9. So when these are negatively charged, they can bind an ammonium ion. And then nitrate can actually be absorbed by a cross-linking by divalent or trivalent cation, where one of the positive charges of the cation can bind to a negative charge on a humic, and then the other charge can bind the nitrate. So to a certain extent, humic substances can bind the different nitrogen species, and of course, with urea, which doesn't have a charge, they can't bind the urea.
How often do I need to apply humates?
Well, the answer to that question really depends on what your goal is, and whether you're going to use a liquid humic substance application or a solid humic substance application. If you're looking for immediate results, of course you want to use a foliar application or even maybe a liquid application to the soil, and that'll be short-term results. Now, scientifically, this is one of the questions that we're currently taking a look at: is how long does the humic substance affect actually last? And we don't really know the answer to that right now, but the liquid applications can be done several times throughout the year to get good results. If you're looking for more longer term results, then you want to use a solid application to the soil. And this can last for 2 to 3 years, depending on how much you put out. So it really depends on the goal that you're trying to achieve with the application.
If my soil already has a lot of organic matter, how will humates help?
Well, just because the soil has a high concentration of organic matter doesn't mean that the plants will experience some kind of stress throughout the growing season. However, I would recommend that if you do have a high organic matter soil, that you use a foliar application to apply directly to the plants. Soil application, because of the high organic matter content, humic substances are very sticky. You can ask the wastewater engineers about the stickiness of humic substances in their filters. So when you apply humic substances to the soil, they can start binding to each other. And so maybe the applications to soil in a high organic matter soil won't have the same effect. But again, in that case, you would want to use a foliar application, and you can still get a good result.
So how does humic acid work with manure?
Yeah, humic acid is a great way to enhance soil carbon. And of course, enhancing soil carbon really depends on the agricultural practices that are used. No-till practices enhance soil carbon more than tillage practices, just because when you're moving the organic matter into the soil, it's going to get degraded and be lost to mineralization of CO2. But in terms of humic substances, the way they enhance the carbon content of the soil is through their biostimulant effect on plants. But humic substance treated plants produce a greater amount of root exudates, which stimulate more microbial growth, and they produce plants with more fine roots. And so when the microbes die and those fine roots die, they add carbon to the soil in addition to the carbonaceous root exudates. So it's a great way to add carbon to the soil. With manure and compost, you have to be very careful about the carbon to nitrogen ratio of the compost manure that you add to the soil. If the carbon to nitrogen ratio is too low, with the amount of carbon that's available, microbes will degrade the residues, and they even may reduce the carbon concentration of the soil. So using humic substances is probably a more sure way, again, depending on the tillage practice, to increase the carbon content of the soil.
Are there any long-term downsides to using humates?
No, there really isn't. The answer to that is just no. The use of humic substances is in agriculture is all beneficial. Humic substances have a biostimulant effect on plants that increases the resistance of plants to stress, and also through their activity of increasing the plant root exudates, the production of fine roots, and the enhanced microbial activity that occurs. They're adding carbon to the soil, and of course carbon sequestration is an important issue these days. So it's all benefits and no drawbacks to using humic substances.
Awesome.